seen Africa both in the 1970s and 80s and now in the new millennium. What kind of an increase in opportunity do you see? Would you sense that Africa is on that cusp of, a quantum leap in terms of development?
Yeah, Africa is definitely on the threshold of a very major development. If you see the GDP growth in the last 7-8 years, together, all the African countries together, it has averaged, I think, about 4.9% per annum. And this is almost double of what one has seen in the 80s and the 90s. And the reasons, I think, are threefold. One is there is definitely a much better political stability in many countries in the last decade compared to earlier. Mm-hmm. There has definitely been a better, I would say, macroeconomic conditions in terms of inflation, containment of inflation, in terms of government deficits, in terms of government debt as a percentage of GDP. All that has become better in the last decade. And thirdly, and very importantly, I think there is definitely a much better business climate, opening up of the economy, a lot of private entrepreneurs going into. So definitely Africa is on the threshold of a very big and a very major growth.
Okay. Well, let me get the man who is fresh from Africa, just flown down. Manoj, what has been your sense for the past 3 months? Probably several times you have studied the economic geography of Africa several times, and now actually having visited 20 countries, what is the sense you're getting? Is Africa as big an opportunity to say that the next decade or two belong to that continent?
Lata, it's so apparent when you go around Africa that this prediction will come true. After the revolutions led by China as a big 1 billion country, then India as a 1 billion country, I think the next revolution, economic revolution, will start and has started in Africa. How we look at it, for the last 2 years, we have reviewed Africa very closely because we will invest significant investments there, not only now but in the next 5 to 10 years. One, the population is about 1 billion. And in the next 30-40 years, India may go to 1.6 billion, China will go to 1.4, Africa will actually go to 2 billion.
Okay.
So actually that is a big one for us. Within the same population, urbanization is great. Today it's 40% urbanization, it's going to 50% urbanization, which is higher than India. The labor market availability is bigger than China. Middle class is bigger than India in terms of same per capita PPV ratios. Youth population is about 25% of the world. Median age is about 17 to 18. And as Mr. Muthuraman said, economic growth is picking up very well. 27 out of 30 top countries of Africa actually have grown very fast in the last 2-3 years. Raw materials are for the first time fully being utilized. Oil is being found in many countries, Nigeria, Ghana, Angola, many countries.
Okay.
And they're utilizing that oil money for the economic growth. So I think next decade, or maybe a couple of decades, will belong to Africa's economic growth, driving global economic growth.
Okay. Well, Mr. Kohli, you're putting the perspective of a company that is looking for consumption. But a lot of the chatter and conversation on Africa is also with respect to its natural resources. And this, Mr. Muthuraman, at a time when the world is hard-pressed for natural resources, probably many of them dwindling, unreplaceable, and for which even substitutes are not being found. What should be the goal of Indian business? Would it be that you better hurry about Africa because, the mineral resources are not going to be available for you to come and tap? They may exhaust or they may get captured by other companies much faster.
You see, in terms of metallic mineral resources, a lot of good resources in places like Australia, Brazil, in the United States and so on, they're all already in the hands of large mining companies. And the newer deposits are in places like Mongolia, Africa and so on. For several decades, the African minerals have been unexploited, largely because of infrastructure and people not being able to go there, transport difficulties and so on. But in the last, I would say, a decade or so, there has been a better exploitation of African deposits, African minerals. See, we must remember Africa is a plentiful mineral resources. It has got half of the world's gold. It's got 80-90% of platinum and chrome ore. It's got, I think, about 10-12% of world's oil. It's got iron ore. It's got good thermal coal. It's got many other mineral resources, and some of them are unexploited and unknown also.
You know, a conspiracy theory that one often hears from economists and even from businessmen is that a lot of it is perhaps already being captured in a sense or exploited by the Chinese. Do you see that as a very big competition? Are they way ahead in terms of, getting to the mineral resources? Or do you think people like you still stand a good chance since you'll have been there earlier?
Look, it's not really a conspiracy theory. It's a question of, which country or which set of people identify opportunities and identify resources faster. Well, India has been in South Africa and in African countries probably many decades earlier. I think China has made use of the opportunities better if you were to see in the last 20 years or so. You go to any African nation, you'll see hordes of Chinese. The Chinese businessmen are extremely well supported by the Chinese government. And I think China very wisely is making huge investments in capturing mineral resources of the African countries. So it is a question of competing, and the world and business is about competition. And we have been there. Tatas have been there for some years. There are other companies which are coming there. I think we need to ensure that we look upon Africa as a place where we need to go and we need to do some big things. And I think that realization in India and among Indian companies is of a more recent origin. But I'm quite confident that our companies will pick up that pace, quite fast in the coming years.
Manoj, China is also a very big donor of aid for several African countries. That gives you some kind of a moral clout over the governments in their decision making. Do you encounter this as a major theme at all when you start looking for business in those countries, in African countries?
I don't think so. I've encountered such kind of major theme. The only thing I know is that the approaches are very, very different. I think Chinese approach is led by government of China. And Mr. Muthuraman is right. The hordes, actually truckloads and plane loads of Chinese are landing up there to exploit the minerals and metals and raw materials. Whereas Indian approach is very, very different. I think in our case, it is our old relationships which are very positive. Indians are perceived to be in a very positive frame, and it is led by Indian private sector, whether it is Tata or Bharti or SR or many others who have. So the approaches are very different. But one thing I agree with Mr. Muthuraman, that I think we have been slower off the take, and I hope with this deal of Bharti Zen, I think we can catalyze much faster Indian movement into Africa, because I think the timing is right. As that FIFA song says, it's time for Africa.
Yes.
So I would like to invite all Indian businessmen, if they have to really grow global, they should definitely look at Africa.
Well, we need to